The fact that people often contrast pain with pleasure in a very general way suggests that many people see pain and pleasure as, if you like, symmetrical. That is, for any pain, it's possible to point to a pleasure of equal force and intensity, so symmetrical in this sense. But in fact, if one tries to imagine that joy or pleasure, which will counterbalance the worst imaginable pain, one is left with only a blank. So, take for example the pain involved in being skinned alive. What joy or pleasure can match the strength of this pain? It seems to me that there is not a single joy in this world whose intensity comes close to even a fraction of this pain. And accordingly, this symmetry view, I think, should be rejected. I think a far more satisfactory theory or account of pain and pleasure is Schopenhauer's, according to which all pleasure is in fact just the removal of some existing pain, or the satisfaction of some existing desire. Schopenhauer therefore characterizes the pain we feel as something positively real, and pleasure, by contrast, as something that is by nature negative. Negative in the sense that it leads only to the absence of pain. And this is supported, it seems to me, by our everyday experience of pleasure. The pleasure of eating seems to consist in the removal of hunger or desire to eat. The pleasure of rest seems to consist in the removal of fatigue or desire to rest. Incidentally, Epicurus held a similar view about pleasure. A pleasure, Epicurus argued, consists in freedom from pain in the body and trouble in the mind. But one important difference is that whereas Epicurus sees this state of painlessness as itself a positive and pleasurable state to be in, Schopenhauer sees it, and I think correctly, as neutral. But to the extent that pleasures exist at all for us, it seems to me that they exist only in the way that an afterimage exists, that is, faintly and fleetingly. And the intensity of a pleasure, not unlike that of an afterimage, is, I think, determined by something like the force of the pain which precedes it, together with how quickly the pain is removed. And so, the most intense pleasure on this view is the quickest recovery from the most intense pain. This appears consistent with the fact that undoubtedly one of the most intense pleasures we can experience is that of relief. So, just to give one example of this, suppose you've been severely anxious about and troubled by some state of affairs for months on end, and you subsequently discover from some statement in a letter, let's say, that all of your worries were completely unfounded. The pleasure that one experiences in a moment of sudden relief like this is quite intense, I think. But even when pleasures are felt vividly in this way, they still possess nothing like the reality or duration of even moderate pains. This is explained by the fact that as soon as the pain is removed, the pleasure is basically over. Nothing, or at any rate very little, is gained in the process but freedom from some pre-existing pain. So just as an afterimage cannot be as vivid as its original, a pleasure cannot be, or at least is seldom, as vivid as the pain which precedes it. And I think it's this sort of account of pain and pleasure that is central, really, to explaining and understanding why happiness always seems to elude us. It seems fairly clear from considerations like these that life is a losing battle. Life is, as Schopenhauer put it, a business that does not cover the costs. So that is all for now. Thanks for listening.